Welcome back. We are joined again by Pepe Escobar, a prolific author and a journalist, to discuss the Memorandum of Understanding, which is supposed to be signed on Friday between the United States and Iran. So thank you for coming on. There's
My pleasure again. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thanks again. And well, there's a lot to discuss here because, well, first of all, a good place to start would be all the secrecy around this Memorandum of Understanding. That is, the Iranians have made some of the information available, while the Americans seem to be not showing their cards at this point. So, why the secrecy, and what do we actually know about what's in this memorandum of understanding?
Well, Glenn, okay, I broke this before, but now I'm breaking to you and your audience in your channel. Larry Johnson and I have direct access to the negotiating table via the Pakistani mediators. And this has been going on for a few weeks now. So a few weeks, 3 weeks ago, Larry and we broke two stories back to back. The first one was a crucial phone call by Pezeshkian to Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of Pakistan. Basically, it was a sort of ultimatum to the Americans: behave, and if you keep overstepping all the thresholds, and some of them that you know very, very well, we're going to have to do a demonstration. And you can imagine what sort of demonstration would that be. No more nuclear ambiguity. Well, the Americans read that and they were very, very angry. 3 days later, we broke another story about the Islamabad Accord. It was practically, I wouldn't say signed, sealed, delivered, reminding us of Stevie Wonder, but it was about to be signed. One of our American sources confirmed to us that Trump had a similar deal in front of him, ready to be signed 6 times. And he always backed off. This breaking news, we were explaining how the memorandum was being articulated, and this came from the Pakistanis who were on the table, negotiators. 3 days later, our channel was erased from YouTube by a direct order of the US government, Glenn. It was the kind of phone call that goes straight to Google, yank these people off. So now we are back with a very, very small channel, picking up what we managed to build in 2 or 3 weeks. It's called Transition Protocol. And the difference with the zillions of other channels on YouTube is that we have our intel directly from people who actually manipulating the intel or bridging gaps with the intel. So it's not only the Pakistani mediators between Iran and the US, but this can be confirmed with sources in the US and also with sources in Iran, Russia, and eventually China, or at least in China, people who have access to privileged information in China. So what we knew this weekend was essential, and this is something that we were discussing earlier this week. Abbas Araghchi was in Islamabad throughout the weekend. So he flew from Tehran specially to Islamabad to discuss the finer points and also the final points of the MOU. Then there was the Israeli attack on Dahiyeh, the Shiite suburb south of Beirut. So the Iranians, via the Pakistanis, and they were actually in Islamabad together discussing. Araghchi told the Pakistanis, look, send a warning to the Americans now. If Israel doesn't stop doing what they're doing against Dahiyeh and against the rest of Lebanon, we are ready. We have our fingers on the trigger literally now against Israel. So the response from the White House this time was practically immediate. Okay, that's it. And we're going to sign the MOU. And obviously, the people who were there talking to, they were not talking to Trump directly. Somebody from the inner circle. We're going to tell the Israelis to back off. So this is what was happening on Sunday night. That's why there was this announcement. On Trump's birthday, June 14th, the day of that absolutely ghastly series of cage matches in the White House lawn, which passes for a cultural exhibition in, in the minds of the Trumpists, right? That's why we had the announcement by the US on June 14th about the MOU. And obviously, immediately afterwards, you can imagine, and you saw for yourself, and your audience saw all for yourselves, the crossfire all across the Beltway, the despair by the Zionist International, by all the neocon international, by the industrial military complex, everybody, about the MOU. But, of course, no details. Even the fact, according to them, that Trump and Vance already electronically signed the MOU. We have not seen evidence about that anywhere. On the Iranian side, Glenn, it's a much more complex process, and much more sophisticated. It's not Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, the leader, who's giving the green light for the MOU. He delegated the final decision to the Supreme National Security Council, 13 members. Two of them only so-called reformists, including President Pezeshkian, and the other ones much more hardcore. So basically, Mojtaba instructed them, if you reach a solid majority among yourselves, the 13, if you have, like, let's say 9, 10, 11, etc., you are authorized to sign the MOU. And that's why we don't have so far, today is Wednesday, an official confirmation on Tehran that Tehran has already signed the MOU. So probably it's going to be left to the last minute in Geneva on Friday, and probably Galibaf himself signing in Geneva. So this is where we are at the moment. As you can see, the back and forth is absolutely frantic, but the Iranians are keeping their cool, like they did prior to these past 2 weeks, let's put it this way. They made it clear to the Americans that they are not in a hurry. They exasperated Trump to a point of he was, completely out of himself. And when they saw that there was a possibility of signing, and they were ready to sign, which was Sunday, there was the Israeli incident. And then once again, they sent the message. It's up to you, because Lebanon is part of the MOU, and you know it. We have been negotiating about it for weeks. If Israel interferes with it, we're going after Israel ourselves now. So this was, let's say, the last straw that convinced the Barbaria camel to actually play the game. But Glenn, we all know we don't know what this is going to lead from now on. This is nothing. This is just a promise to start talking.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That is often is portrayed as a deal, as if it will bring in peace. But yeah, it will usher in 2 months of negotiations. So, but I'm curious though. One of the main things that could derail this whole thing is it's very difficult in the US for Trump to sell to his people. That is in even the start of the ceasefire was based on the premise that, or at least it would have this point of departure to start from the 10-point plan of the Iranians. But as soon as the ceasefire was in place, Trump just walked that one back, because there was no way for him to essentially show this to his own people, because it was a defeat. But how about this? I mean, the peace that Trump is speaking of, which sounds like a victory, is very different from reality. So at some point, the actual text of this memorandum of understanding will have to come out, and it's going to be very hard for Trump to be the strong man, the one who can still mock Obama for the JCPOA, when this, by every metric, this is a huge setback for the US. None of his objectives have been achieved, and the Iranians will definitely come out on top here. So in a big way. So how can Trump go to his hawks, all of these people, and essentially said that the war was a massive failure. We bled out our inventory. We're in a much weaker position now than we were before, and the Iranians will be significantly strengthened. I mean, he's been describing this war as a big success ever since day one.
Mm-hmm. Well, he does that, Glenn, by twisting narratives. by inventing narratives, by forgetting previous narratives, by even forgetting what he said before he changed the narrative. That's his modus operandi. So there are three stages for him to declare this a victory. And this is where we are at the moment. He's basically saying that the oil will start to flow again through the Strait of Hormuz this Friday, which was the situation 3 months before he started the war on February 28th. So he's selling this as a victory. Now we have no problems with the oil anymore. So the oil markets are satisfied. The bond markets are satisfied, thanks to me. And he said that yesterday again in Evian, not far from where I am. I didn't even bother to go there because it's an absolute waste of time. He actually said that yesterday. I ended 10 wars. No, it's not a joke, Glenn. He actually said that in front of everybody, including the guests. It's absolutely fascinating that there are 4 BRICS at the G7 as guests: India, Brazil, Egypt, and UAE. So the G7 are desperate. They need to invite the BRICS to their summit, otherwise to be a little less irrelevant than they already are. Anyway, he also said, I am the boss. And there was no irony. He entered the room, everybody was in the room looking at him, and he said, I am the boss. And they left like this nervously because they know he is the boss. So what is the boss selling? Number one, I liberated the free flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that we all had before the war. Number two, the oil markets are going back to normal, and the bond markets are going back to normal. So it's mission accomplished, even without going on top of an aircraft carrier like Dabia. And number three, he's playing for time. That's the most important part. He's playing for time. Nobody knows, okay, for what? Essentially to rearm the US, because the war can be resumed anytime after the midterms. There won't be a resumption of war before the midterms. He wants to basically do damage control of his political capital in the run up towards the midterms. So he can sell these as a victory. And of course, the real nitty gritty is not now. The real nitty gritty will start in the second stage after the MOU. The first stage is these first 30 days. Then the negotiations start at a period that has been established as 60 days and maybe expanded. So this will be around August, late July, early August. Then we're going to have August, September, these discussions going all over the place. And it's going to be very acrimonious, of course. But he can always sell that, look, we want peace. And Iran doesn't want peace. They don't want to sign anything and all that. And he is absolutely convinced he can sell that to domestic public opinion as a victory. And then, cut some of his losses in the midterms. This is what it is. But the big picture, Glenn, which is something that you and I and many others study, which is the big war in Eurasia or against Eurasia, it's not going to change. It's going to be slowed down a little bit, because obviously this is a massive strategic defeat of the US, Israel against Iran. You cannot disguise that. You only sell this as a victory to absolute imbeciles. But he's going to try very, very hard. And a lot of people, even inside the US, won't be convinced. And especially the Ziocons and the industrial military complex, they are already, total fury against it. But playing for time in the next 2, 3, 4 months suits him very, very well. The Iranians have no illusions about it. And everybody from Galibaf to the IRGC commanders are saying, look, we're paying attention to every move, and if they try anything, we have our finger on the trigger, which is absolutely correct. They haven't changed their position. If in between, like in the first 30 days of the MOU, and probably in the first part of the 60 days negotiation. They get some sanctions relief. They actually get the $12 billion, which is supposed to be paid in the next few days of a total of 24 billion. They get some extra money from from the UAE. They got already 2 billion from the UAE. That famous Emirati flight that landed in Tehran was carrying $2 billion in cash. And this was, once again, organized by the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis were the middlemen between Abu Dhabi and Tehran. If they can get these, and of course, the end of the American blockade of Hormuz, and they continue to sell, especially to their Asian clients, for Iran in the short term, excellent. Much better than it was until today. But they have no illusions long term and no illusions about the negotiations.
So, well, this is a problem for the United States. Well, again, if it's buying for time, strategic pause to, well, prepare itself back for war. The problem is that even after a pause, they can replenish and regroup. They still don't have a viable war plan, though, how to defeat the Iranians. Again, they couldn't do it the first time around. But I find it interesting that the Iranians demanded this buy-in. That is, if they can restart the war later, at least they have to first kick in this money now in the beginning to essentially buy themselves 2 months. But even this memorandum of understanding, this 2 months of peace, which might drag on, how would the Israelis respond to this, though? Because, as you said, the Iranians are very clear that they consider Lebanon to be part of this. That is, they're not going to have a peace deal, which essentially allows Israel and the United States to finish off Lebanon and then return to a war with Iran later on. They don't like this. They know the sequencing they would ideally have. So, how will Trump, control the Israelis here? Because I'm following some of the Israeli media, and neither the political or the leadership or the media seem very happy about the idea that they have to, walk back from Lebanon. And some are suggesting, well, perhaps we'll bomb Beirut less, but under no circumstance will they depart Lebanon. But it's how exactly is this going to work?
Well, I love your diplomatic touch, Glenn. I prefer to go ACDC Highway to Hell, really hardcore. Anyway, if you look at the message that the Iranians delivered to the Americans on Sunday, this is how they're going to react. Essentially, they're telling the Americans, look, Lebanon, Hezbollah, everything is part of the MOU. You know it. We know it. If Israel breaks it, and if you don't help Israel, which is you should not do because they are breaking something that you agreed about, which is Lebanon as an integral part of the MOU, we are going to deal with them directly. So the answer is inbuilt in this attitude. The Iranians know, and the mediators know. We heard this from the Pakistanis at the table. Not only the Pakistanis at the table, but also other players they were talking to, especially Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The most important, apart from UAE. They know that Israel can break this thing anytime they see fit, which is always. And they're ready for it and they have no illusions. But the Iranians already told the Americans how they're going to react. Okay, if they break it, we're going to bomb Israel really, really hard. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if you intervene, then this means you break the MOU. If you break the MOU, we will also break the MOU. So that's the basic difference between now and the recent past in US-Iran relations. If commitments are broken, now it's not unilateral anymore, it's bilateral. And the Iranians have been sending this message to the Americans virtually every day. Glenn, I don't know if anybody in that ultra mediocre circle around Trump actually understands what that means. I don't think they understand it yet. So they're going to have to see it live. If the bombing of Dahieh especially continues, and The Israeli plan from Dahieh is Gaza 2.0. Make no mistake about it. They want to occupy southern Lebanon permanently and to turn Dahieh into a new Gaza. If that continues, the Iranians already said, no way. So how is the Trump administration going to react to that? Is Trump willing to bomb his own MOU, which he is selling as a victory as we speak?